Who let the ambulance driver in? That was the first thing my mother said to me after 11 years of silence. Not hello, not your name. She said it in the marble atrium of the hospital her family name was about to be bolted onto, loud enough that 300 donors and surgeons and board members turned their heads at once. My brother, Adrian, in a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, took one step back from me like I was something that had leaked out of a biohazard bin. You need to leave, he said. This is invitation only. He was right about one thing. They didn't invite me. They spent 11 years scrubbing me out of the family record like a charting error, so they had no idea who actually put my name on that guest list. And they definitely had no idea that the man funding their $40 million pavilion was breathing because of a flight my crew made 4 years ago in a flood. Before I tell you how I took their name off that building without ever raising my voice, do me a favor. Friends, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Hit the like button and subscribe if you believe some debts get paid in full. The string trio near the fountain stops mid-phrase. 300 people go quiet at the same time, and the sound that's left is the water and the hum of the HVAC in that big glass ceiling. My mother's hand is shaking. The champagne in it tilts. She points at the security desk. Regina Marchetti, chief of cardiothoracic surgery, 41 years at that hospital, and she can't get the word out. She just points. I don't move. My boots are planted on the polished terrazzo. I wore flight boots under my dress that night. Black, scuffed at the toe, because the grafted skin over my right ankle doesn't tolerate heels, and I stopped apologizing for that a long time ago. I look past her, to the man standing near the model of the new tower. Paul Marchetti, my father, anesthesiologist, a man who has spent his entire career keeping people asleep. He looks at me. He calculates something. Then he turns his shoulder and finds a sudden, urgent interest in the architectural rendering, and I understand that nothing has changed. I breathe in through my nose. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. The same rhythm that kept my hands steady on a bleeding femoral artery at 2,000 feet over the Helmand River. A hand settles flat against my back. Reese. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. My husband spent 9 years as an Air Force pararescueman, and there is a particular stillness men like that carry into a room. The 2 guards walking toward us slow down at about 15 feet, look at him, and decide to wait for an order nobody has the spine to give. 3 weeks earlier, the world looked different. Concrete floor, the smell of jet fuel and cold coffee. Hangar 2 at our field in Berkshire County, the rotor blades of a Bell 429 tied down, the maintenance lights buzzing. I was at a steel desk that used to be a workbench when a heavy cream envelope came through with the morning courier, Ironwood Air Medical. Attention, Chief Executive. I sliced it open with a trauma shear. Gold foil, thick stock, engraved so deep you could read it with your thumb. The Ellsworth Foundation and St. Brendan Health System request the honor of your presence at the dedication of the Marchetti Pavilion. I read the last 2 words maybe 9 times. Reese came in with 2 mugs and set one on the steel. He read it over my shoulder, and I watched the muscle jump in his jaw. You don't have to take this call, he said. I picked up the coffee. It was scalding, and it was bitter, and it put me back in my body. No, I said. When you find a bleed, you don't walk around it. You go in and you clamp it. Back in the atrium. The guards are still frozen. Reese steps forward half a pace, and the whole knot of donors near us shifts backward like a school of fish. I let him have the floor. I drift to the edge, to the little bar they set up under the staircase, and the kid working it slides me a glass of ice water and can't stop staring. Up on the platform, my mother taps the microphone. Feedback screams off the glass. She smiles. It's the smile she uses in a deposition. Thank you all for being here, she says. Tonight, we honor 3 generations of one family's commitment to medicine. My father served, my husband and I built, and my son, she pauses, and she lets the pause sit there and get heavy. My only child carries it forward. My hand closes around the water glass. The ice cracks. Friends, I want you to understand something. A wound bleeds and you can pack it. A burn scars and you can graft it. But that word only that is a different kind of injury. That is being erased while you are standing in the same room, breathing the same air, and there is no procedure for it. The cold of the glass bites into the old surgical scar across the back of my right hand, and it drags me 11 years backward. I was 18, Sunday dinner at the house in Brookline. It was never a meal. It was a case review. White tablecloth, my grandmother's silver, the smell of rosemary and expensive red wine, and my father at the head of the table cutting into a lamb chop with a serrated knife, chewing slowly, swallowing, and then tapping his fork twice against the rim of his plate. That was the signal. Report. Adrian went first. He always went first. He was 22, one semester from a top 5 medical school, and he recited his MCAT breakdown and his research placement and the name of the attending who had already promised him a letter, and he did it smoothly, like a broker reading a good quarter. My mother nodded in slow arithmetic approval. I sat at the far end with my hands under the tablecloth. My knuckles were split and taped. I'd spent that afternoon in a volunteer bay at a fire station in Lowell, learning to hold pressure on a training dummy until my forearms shook, and then rucking 4 miles home with 40 pounds of sand in a backpack because a recruiter told me the standard and I wanted to beat it. In that house, that wasn't discipline. That was evidence of a limitation. Physical work meant you weren't smart enough to sit in a chair. After the plates were cleared, we moved to the front hall, because the front hall had the wall, not diplomas. My mother thought framed diplomas were suburban. She had a bronze panel mounted there, a foundry cast replica of the donor plate on the hospital's old cardiac wing, and every Marchetti physician had a line on it: name, degree, institution, years of service. Lit from above by 2 brass picture lights, so the metal always looked warm. She stood in front of it with her wine, and she looked at that bronze, and then she looked at her children, and I promise you she was not seeing 2 people. She was reading a balance sheet. 2 weeks later, I dropped a folder on the glass coffee table. Enlistment paperwork. United States Army. 68 Whiskey Combat Medic. My mother stopped swirling her wine. She didn't shout. Shouting is for people who have lost control, and she never lost control in her life. "What is this?" she said in a voice so flat it went through bone. "I'm enlisting," I said. I locked my knees and put my voice in my chest, the way the recruiter taught me. "I ship after graduation." She picked up the folder without opening it, dropped it on the floor, and put the heel of her shoe on it. "You are not going to be a technician," she said. "You are not going to spend your life doing what a physician tells you to do, in the dirt, for $30,000 a year, with my name on you. I'm going to keep people alive," I said. She said, "No, you're going to embarrass me. Medics take orders from the people in this room. You are choosing to be staff." I didn't argue. I walked out. I thought that was the punishment. I was wrong. 2 days later, I came in from a run in freezing rain, soaked through, and I heard a drill going in the front hall. My mother was up on a step stool with a cordless driver in her hand, and when she came down and turned around, there was a new plate on that bronze wall. Below Adrian's line, above my father's. Bigger than either. Blank. No name, no degree, no years. Just polished bronze with nothing cut into it, catching the light from the brass lamps. "Look at it," she said. I looked at it. The house was so quiet I could hear the rain on the transom over the door. "If you put on that uniform," she said, "your line in this family stays exactly like that. Empty. You will not exist." She wasn't being dramatic, friends. She was making a promise, and she kept it 3 months later on the night of my graduation. The party was at a club in Chestnut Hill. Valet, cut grass, cigars on the terrace. There was a banner over the dining room with my graduating year on it, and within 40 minutes that party wasn't mine anymore, because Adrian's acceptance had come through that week. My Aunt Colette found me by the terrace door, looked me up and down over the rim of a martini, and said, "So you're really doing it. Off to be an ambulance driver with a merit badge." Then she walked away without waiting to hear anything back. My mother stood up and struck a fork against a crystal glass 3 times. The room went silent. 200 people turned toward her. "Tonight we celebrate intellect," she said. "We celebrate a family that has spent 60 years earning the right to be trusted with other people's hearts. Some children inherit that and raise it higher." She lifted her glass toward my brother. Applause. Then she waited for the clapping to stop, and her smile went flat, and her eyes found me in the corner. "And some," she said, "choose to settle. We don't celebrate settling in this family." To Adrian. My father raised his glass and echoed it. To Adrian. Every head in that room turned to watch me break. They wanted the 18-year-old girl to put her face in her hands and run out the service door, because that would have proved they were right about me. I didn't give them a thing. I sat down in a wooden chair against the wall, put my feet flat, gripped the armrests until my knuckles went white, straightened my spine, and looked directly at my mother without blinking. She held it for about 3 seconds, and then looked away, annoyed that I wasn't crying. I stayed in that chair for 2 hours. When the crowd started moving toward dinner, a hand closed on my shoulder. Rough hand. Not a surgeon's. My grandfather, Salvatore Marchetti. Everybody called him Sal. He was wearing a wool cardigan in a room full of custom suits, and he had a barrel chest and a voice like a gravel truck downshifting. He'd been a medic in Vietnam, and after that he drove an ambulance out of a two-bay garage in Lowell for 31 years and never once made more than $40,000. He didn't say anything inside. He walked me out the side door into the summer dark and let the glass shut behind us. Then he dug in his cardigan pocket and pressed something into my hand. A stainless pocket watch, tarnished, scratched, dented on one side, with a big black sweep second hand. Counted respirations with that for 31 years, he said. Your grandmother gave it to me the week I shipped out. Papa, I said. I know what they just did. He pointed a crooked finger back at the building. Listen to me. Medicine isn't the letters after your name. It's the minute you don't waste. Those people up there, they got very good at the letters and they forgot about the minute. He tapped the watch face with his thumbnail. Don't ever go begging that wall for a line, kid. You go build your own thing, and you keep them out of it. He patted my cheek with a hand like a work glove and went back inside. I stood in the parking lot for a long time with that watch getting warm in my fist. Then I walked down the drive and out to the street, and I did not go back to that house for 11 years. I thought walking away was the hard part. I had no idea what they were already doing with the paperwork. 2 years later, I was 20, in a rear detachment before deployment, and I went into a bank in Lowell to pull the money my grandfather had put aside for me, not a fortune, $91,000 in a custodial account, plus the deed to the garage, which he'd told me 100 times was mine. The teller frowned at her monitor. She turned it toward me. 0. My mother was the executor and the custodian. She'd liquidated the account, and 8 months earlier she'd sold the garage on Bridge Street to a developer for $430,000, using a power of attorney my grandfather signed when he was 91 and 2 years into a dementia diagnosis, on a day when he could not have told you what month it was. I drove to Brookline. I didn't knock. She was in the study with a stack of documents and a gold pen. Where is it? I said. She didn't look up. Reallocated, she said. Adrian's practice needed capital. Your grandfather would have wanted it invested rather than spent. That was mine. He told me it was mine. She put the pen down and looked at my boots. You chose a life that doesn't require capital, she said. So live in it. Then she picked up the house phone and called the gate service. And 11 minutes later, I was standing on the street listening to the lock engage behind me. That's what financial abuse looks like in a good zip code, friends. It comes in cashmere, and it's notarized. 3 years after that, I was 23 years old, sitting in the back of a Black Hawk over eastern Afghanistan with a hoist cable paying out and a dust storm coming in from the west. There was a staff sergeant named Deacon Pruitt down there in a wadi, with a shattered pelvis and an arterial bleed and about 11 minutes of life left in him. 56 years old, career soldier, bad knees, and a laugh like a truck engine misfiring. I did not think about medical schools. I did not think about bronze plates. I went down on the cable into a dust cloud so thick I couldn't see my own boots, got a junctional tourniquet seated on him, and rode back up with 240 pounds of man clipped to my harness while the aircraft yawed and the crew chief screamed numbers at me. I packed that wound with my knee in his hip, and my grandfather's watch open on the deck beside my hand counting. 11 minutes to the surgical team. He held my wrist the whole way, shaking, and never took his eyes off my face. That is where I learned what my mother never understood. Human worth is not cast in bronze. It is the weight you are willing to carry when everything around you is on fire, and the minute you refuse to waste. I was 22 when I got the call about my grandfather, and I want to be careful here because this is the part that still costs me something. He'd been failing for a year. I got compassionate leave and flew to Boston and drove out to the nursing facility in Chelmsford. Not a nice one. My mother had moved him there when the money went, and she'd never once visited, and the staff told me that without me asking. He was very small in that bed, but he knew me. He got a fistful of my sleeve and pulled me down and said, "You still got the watch?" I showed it to him. He laughed, and it turned into a cough, and when it was done, he pointed at the nightstand. There was an envelope. My name on it in his terrible block printing. Not now, he said. Not till you know what you're worth. You'll know when. I sat with him 4 days. On the 5th day, he was gone. The funeral was at a place in Newton, marble steps, valet, and it was pouring rain. I came straight from a red-eye in wrinkled ACUs because I didn't own a black dress and I hadn't slept in 30 hours. 2 men in suits stepped out under the portico and put a hand flat on my chest and moved me back into the rain. Guest list, one of them said, and he tilted the clipboard, and I saw my own name on it with a line of black marker through it. My mother was standing inside the glass. She looked at my boots and my uniform and the wet on my face, and she mouthed it slowly so I couldn't misread it. Not today. You're a disgrace. Then she turned around and walked toward the chapel, and the deadbolt clicked. I stood outside in the rain with my hands around the wrought iron, and I could hear the organ through the wall. They were burying the only person in my bloodline who ever looked at me and saw a human being, and they locked me out of it because my clothes were wrong. I got the envelope out of my cargo pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I tore the flap. I read 2 lines. Kid, if you're reading this, I already know how it went. Don't let them tell you what the last 11 years were. That was as far as I got. I folded it up and put it away. And friends, I carried that letter for 5 years and never read the rest of it. I couldn't. Every time I got it out, I got about 6 words in and my throat closed. I got up off my knees in that parking lot and I made myself a promise. They locked a door on me because I didn't own the building. So I was going to go build a building. I was 24 when I met Reese Alvarado in a stairwell in Puerto Rico after the storms, both of us running rescue out of a high school gymnasium with no power and a triage floor that ran 48 hours straight. He saw the watch clipped to my vest. He didn't ask about it. He just gave me a short nod, and I understood. People with scars recognize scars. You don't have to explain the dark to somebody who already knows how to move around in it. 9 months later, he turned in his beret and I finished my contract, and we took every dollar of my hazard pay and my separation pay and a small business loan and leased a dead hangar in Berkshire County that had a hole in the roof and pigeons in the rafters. Ironwood Air Medical. Critical Care Air Transport. 2 used aircraft, 6 crew, and a lot of nights on cots in the back office with the space heater going. Year 2 nearly killed it. We lost a contract when a hospital system consolidated, and I sat on the hangar floor at 2 in the morning with a spreadsheet that said we had 11 weeks. Reese sat down next to me on the concrete and said one thing, then we go get the flights nobody else will take. So we did. Weather minimums, mountain LZs, rural transfers 3 hours from a trauma center, the runs the big operators declined because the reimbursement was bad. We got a reputation as the outfit that launched, and in this business, that reputation is worth more than a sales team. 4 years after that, we had 11 aircraft, 9 bases across New England and Appalachia, and the same hospital administrators who used to call me sweetheart on the phone were sitting in my lobby drinking my bad coffee waiting to sign. Somewhere in there, I had a moment of weakness. I want to be honest about it, because I think some of you have had the same one. A week before our wedding, I bought a plain cream invitation, and I sat at that steel desk for an hour, and then I wrote out the date and the address of a lake in Vermont, and I mailed it to Brookline. Just left the door open 1 inch, just in case. It came back 11 days later. Returned to sender. But the envelope had been opened cleanly with a letter opener, so I know she read it. She'd taken a red pen and cut a line through my name so hard the card was torn through the middle, and underneath she'd written 3 sentences in that flawless hand. A technician marrying a technician. Do not attach this family's name to it. Do not contact us again. I stood on the dock with that card and the last thread just dissolved. It didn't snap. It didn't make a sound. It went to ash and blew off. Reese came out and took it out of my hand and read it and crushed it and dropped it in the fire ring. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. Quiet is the only revenge worth having, he said. We'll just keep building until they're standing in something we own. That's how the Salvatore line started. 2 years ago, I opened an encrypted file on our server and typed that name in. It's a carve-out. 2% off the top of every corporate contract we sign, and it pays for flights that nobody bills for uninsured patients out of counties with no trauma center, no invoice, no collections, no letter 6 months later. The line item exists inside my company, and it is not in a single press release. My grandfather didn't leave me a trust. He left me a watch and one instruction. Don't waste the minute. So I bought minutes for people who couldn't afford them, and I put his name on it. 4 years ago, One of those flights was a flood evacuation in eastern Kentucky. A man in his late 20s, hypothermic chest trauma from a collapsed porch roof, pulled off a shed with a hoist by my crew in weather two other operators had turned down. He'd been running a free mobile clinic out of two converted trucks for 3 years, after walking away from a family fortune that had his last name on it. He never knew whose aircraft that was. He thanked a crew chief, and that was the end of it. I opened my eyes in the atrium, and I'm back. Fountain, glass ceiling, 300 people in black tie. And standing at the edge of the platform in a tuxedo, holding a glass he hasn't sipped from, is the principal donor. The man whose foundation is putting $40 million into that tower, and whose signature is on the naming agreement, Theo Ellsworth. Older now, better haircut. Same look under the eyes that you don't lose once you've had it. The universe has a mean sense of humor, friends. My family spent 11 years erasing me, and then built their entire legacy on the money of a man who is upright and breathing because of a flight my company paid for out of a fund named after the grandfather they buried without me. I set the water glass down. I put my hand through Reese's arm. Ready, he says. Yes, I say. And we walk straight across that atrium, through the middle of the crowd, to the reserved table at the front. The crowd opens for us. There is a difference between people who dress powerful and people who are, and a room always knows. We sit down at the second table from the platform, the one that in an event like this is the actual center of gravity. My mother is working the room and she glances over to check the seating and she stops dead. The champagne tilts. I watch the blood go out of her face in real time. Before she can move, a shadow falls across our table. Vivian Ellsworth. 71 years old, chair of the foundation, black velvet, a scotch she is barely drinking. She walks past 3 board members without seeing them and stops in front of us. Captain Alvarado, she says. Miss Marchetti. Ma'am, Reese says. Ironwood flies my foundation's rural program, she says to me. My people tell me you launch when nobody launches. She takes a sip. I was glad you accepted. Then her eyes sharpen about a millimeter. Tell me, she says. Do you know Dr. Adrian Marchetti? He's to be chief of the new pavilion. I take a slow drink of ice water. We grew up in the same house, I say. Vivian Ellsworth has spent 50 years reading rooms for a living. She does not ask a second question. She just says, "Is that so?" and nods once, and walks away to shake a senator's hand. 2 minutes later, they come for me in the corridor. I'd stepped out toward the restrooms, and the heavy doors cut the party down to a hum, and then there were fast footsteps on carpet and a hand clamped around my bicep. Adrian, red in the face, sweating through a $2,000 collar. What did you say to Vivian Ellsworth? He hisses. What did you tell her? I look down at his hand on my arm. Then I reach over with my left, take his wrist, and put pressure on the nerve under the thumb, quick, controlled, the way you break a grip on a combative patient. His fingers pop open, and he stumbles back holding his hand, staring at me like I'm something that got loose. What have you told them about me? I ask. My voice is very quiet. Nothing that isn't true, he says. I earned this. You earned it with $430,000 that came out of an old man's estate on a power of attorney he wasn't competent to sign, I say. And your practice hasn't cleared a legitimate profit in 3 years. You're carrying $2 million in debt against your billing. And if you don't get this chief position, your creditors take the practice in November. He hits the wall. There's nowhere else to go. They think I'm an only child, he says. It comes out before he can stop it. And once it's out, he can't get it back. And I watch my brother's face come apart. The Ellsworth gift is conditional on a family legacy audit, he says. Fast, quiet, frantic. They vet the matching donation. If they find out where our match came from, if they find out about the estate, about you, Vivian pulls the $40 million and the naming and she reports it. Sloane, please, just go out the side. Just don't be here. He reaches out and actually takes hold of the hem of my dress. My brother, the neurosurgeon. Friends, I want to ask you something right here, and I want an honest answer in the comments. If your own family sold what your grandfather left you and then used that money to build a monument to themselves, could you ever forgive that? Type yes or never. I read every single one. I put my hand in my pocket and my fingers close around the cold steel of that watch. I'm going back inside, I tell him. Let's find out how much weight that name actually holds. I push the doors open and the microphone shrieks, and the MC says, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the dedication." The plates go. The room settles. Silver on crystal, 3 times. My mother steps to the microphone in black silk. She looks out at that crowd and she feeds on it, the way she always has. "We are here to honor excellence," she says. "In this profession, credentials are not vanity. They are a promise to a patient on a table. 60 years, 3 generations, 1 standard. We don't lower it. We don't dilute it. We cut away what doesn't serve the patient." Applause. Cameras. She glows. I cross my legs and turn the ice in my glass, and I feel absolutely nothing but a kind of clinical pity because I am watching a car go off a bridge in slow motion, and the driver has both hands on the wheel and her foot on the floor. Then Theo Ellsworth steps up. He doesn't smile. He undoes one button and puts both hands on the podium. "Excellence," he says, and the word sounds like ash coming out of him. My whole life I was told excellence was a title and a building. 4 years ago, I was in a county in eastern Kentucky with 2 trucks and a nurse practitioner running a clinic my family had told me was a waste of my name. In August of that year, the creek came up 11 feet in 4 hours, and a porch roof came down on my chest, and I want to be clear with this room, I should be dead. Nobody in that atrium is breathing. 2 operators declined that flight for weather, he says. 1 did not. A crew came into that valley at night, at minimums, with a hoist, and took me off a shed roof. I spent 2 years trying to find out who paid for it, because nobody ever billed me. Nobody ever billed my family. Not $1. He lifts his head and looks straight at our table. It was a fund inside a private air medical company. Internal line item: no press, no plaque, no donor wall. It's called the Salvatore Line, and it's named after a Vietnam medic who drove an ambulance out of a 2-bay garage in Lowell for 31 years. When he says my grandfather's name in that room, my chest goes tight for exactly 1 second. Papa Sal is in that building. His name just stopped 300 people's hearts, and none of them know it but me. Theo raises his glass. To the CEO of Ironwood Air Medical. To the woman who bought my life with money she never asked to be thanked for. Sloane Marchetti. The room detonates. They don't just clap. Chairs scrape back on terrazzo, and 300 people who buy and sell hospital systems before breakfast are standing on their feet for a medic. And then there's a crash that cuts through all of it. My mother's wine glass hits the floor and comes apart, and red goes across the hem of that black silk and spreads out across the white stone like something at a scene. Her face is the color of wet paper. She grabs at the microphone stand and her rings rattle against the metal. There's been a confusion," she says, and the feedback howls. "She's a distant relation." "She's not." And my brother breaks. He stands up and he points at me, and he shouts, in front of the board and the donors and 2 cameras, "You were not invited. Get out. The ovation dies." Theo steps away from the podium and walks to the edge of the platform and looks down at my brother, and his voice carries the whole atrium without a microphone. "I put her on the list myself," he says. "Adrian, did your mother tell my mother you were an only child?" The silence in that room is a physical object. At the front table, a chair pushes back very slowly. Vivian Ellsworth stands up in black velvet and turns her head, and she does not look at the crowd, and she does not look at her son. She locks on to my mother and my brother, and I have seen a lot of dangerous things in my life, friends, and I want to tell you that is one of the top 5. Survival instinct is an ugly, honest thing, and my mother gets there first. She comes down off that platform in her heels through the broken glass and the spilled wine, past a state senator, and takes hold of my bare arm with both hands. Her fingers are freezing. Her mascara has let go, and there are gray tracks down through the makeup. "Sloane," she breathes. "Sweetheart, come outside with me, sweetheart." The woman who mouthed disgrace at me through a pane of glass in the rain is using sweetheart as body armor. She's trying to walk me out of that room as proof that we are a family, because that is the only thing that stops Vivian Ellsworth from picking up the phone. I let her pull me into the corridor. I want to see the bottom of it. The doors swing shut. She drops the face immediately. She's hyperventilating, back against the wall, and under the perfume there's the sour smell of pure panic. "Fine," she says. "You've made your point. Now go back in there and fix it. Tell Vivienne it was a misunderstanding. Tell her we're estranged over something small." I look at her. My resting pulse is about 60. "I'll give you the wall," she says, and her voice drops into something desperate and fast. "I will have your line cut. Full plate, your name, your rank, your company, and I'll have it set above your brother's. Everyone who walks into that house will see it. Sloane, please. The bronze. The brass lamps. The blank plate. At 18, I would have crawled over broken glass for a line on that wall. I'm 29 now, and I'm standing in a corridor looking at a hollowed-out woman offering me a piece of metal, and I understand at last that it was always just a piece of metal. She reaches for my arm again. "Don't touch me," I say, and leave the plate blank. It's the only honest thing in that house. I push the doors open and walk back into the light. She comes stumbling in behind me. 300 people, nobody has moved. Vivian Ellsworth is standing exactly where she was. "Miss Marchetti," she says, and her voice goes to every corner of that atrium. "Are you blood to this family?" I put my hand in my pocket and wrap my fingers around the steel. "I was born a Marchetti," I say. At 18, I enlisted in the United States Army as a combat medic. My mother told me I was choosing to be staff. When my grandfather went into memory care, she used a power of attorney. He signed at 91 to sell his property and liquidate the account. He left me $430,000 from the garage on Bridge Street, $91,000 from the account. That money capitalized my brother's practice, and I would look closely at where the matching gift for this pavilion came from. I have not spoken to these people in 11 years. They locked me out of his funeral in the rain. The sound that goes through that crowd is not a gasp. It's lower than that. It's the sound of 300 people deciding at once that they will never do business with a name again. "Theo," I say, "audit the match. It's not their money. It's his." Then I turn to my mother one last time. She's holding the edge of a pillar. She can't get air. And I can see her arriving, finally, at the thing she has been outrunning for 11 years, which is that the daughter she threw out is the only person in the building she can't buy, threaten, or bill. I hook my arm through my husband's and we walk down the center of that atrium toward the doors, and every single person in the room is on their feet, and nobody is clapping now, and somehow that's better. We're at the doors when there's a heavy sound behind us. Reese glances back over my shoulder and he says, quietly, just for me, "Your mother's on the floor." I don't turn around. Somebody in that building is a physician. It's the one thing they're actually good at. 2 hours later, I'm on the helipad on top of our hangar in the Berkshires, and the wind coming across that flat roof will cut you in half. I take the letter out of my jacket. 5 years, I've carried this. 5 years, I've read the same 6 words and folded it back up. I read the whole thing. Kid, if you're reading this, I already know how it went. Don't let them tell you what the last 11 years were. I watched your mother put a blank plate on a wall to break an 18-year-old girl, and I never forgave her for it, and I want you to stop waiting for her. You are not an empty line. You are the minute. You hold it. I'm proud of you every single day, and I'm not going to be around to keep saying it. So read this again when you need it. Papa. I get to the end, and one tear comes down my face in that cold wind, and I let it. It isn't grief, exactly. It's the weight of an 11-year war finally coming off the bones. I forgive myself for wanting a mother who was never actually in the building. Then I take out my phone. Regina Marchetti block, delete. Paul Marchetti block, delete. Adrian Marchetti block, delete. 3 taps. No last words. The screen goes black. Vivian Ellsworth didn't cancel a naming. She ordered an autopsy. The foundation's forensic accountants had the estate file open inside 9 days. Probate fraud. A power of attorney executed 2 years into a documented dementia diagnosis, and $430,000 that walked from an old man's estate into a private surgical practice and back out as a philanthropic match. The Massachusetts Attorney General's office opened a fiduciary investigation before the end of the month, and the probate court reopened the estate. The $40 million went away in a single letter. The tower opened 8 months later under a different name. St. Brendan's board asked for my mother's resignation as chief of cardiothoracic surgery, and when she refused, they voted. The state medical board opened a professional conduct review that is still going. My brother's practice went under in November exactly like I told him it would, and the hospital pulled his privileges pending the AG matter. They sold the house in Brookline in the spring. The people who measured a human being in credentials got taken apart by a credentialing committee. There's a symmetry there I didn't design, and don't apologize for enjoying. The emails came, of course. My father wrote first. Subject line, please. A soft, careful paragraph about the house and about family and about forgiveness, asking whether Ironwood might extend a bridge loan. A man who stood by a rendering of a hospital tower and turned his shoulders so he wouldn't have to see me. Silent men are not innocent men. They're just quiet about it. I moved it to trash and emptied the folder. My Aunt Colette, the one with the merit badge line, wrote in March because nobody in Boston would seat her anymore. My cousin Grant wrote in May asking if I'd put in a word for him with a health system that flies our aircraft. I read both of them all the way through. I didn't answer either one. Some verdicts are better delivered as silence. Adrian showed up at the hangar in October. Just stood at the open bay door in a jacket that didn't fit anymore. I knew, he said. About the garage, about the account. I was 24 and I knew, and I took it, and I told myself you'd have wasted it. I let that sit there in the diesel smell for a while. Thanks for saying it, I said. And then I went back to work, and he stood there a minute, and then he left. That's the whole scene. There isn't more. Sometimes the honest conversation doesn't fix anything, and you're still allowed to walk away from it. 6 months after that, it's a Friday night in the hangar, and it smells like hickory smoke and brisket because Reese dragged 2 smokers out onto the concrete pad, and somebody's got a speaker going. Deacon Pruitt is in a folding chair with a titanium brace bolted down the length of his right leg, laughing that misfiring truck laugh, handing a paper plate to Theo Ellsworth, who is in a flannel shirt with his sleeves rolled up and fits in better than he ever did in that tuxedo. 2 of my night crews are arguing about a mountain approach. The pigeons are long gone. The roof doesn't leak. I lean against the door frame of the shop with a cold beer, and I look at the wall on my left. Bare gray block, no bronze, no brass lamps, no lines. Pinned to it with duct tape and drywall screws. A combat medical badge. A bent hoist carabiner from a flood in Kentucky. A Polaroid of Reese and me sunburned on a dock in Vermont. And a creased photograph of a young man in dusty fatigues in 1968, sitting on the back step of a helicopter with a stainless pocket watch open in his palm, squinting into the sun. A wall built out of scars and hardware and the truth. Reese looks over from across the bay, stops talking, and lifts his bottle an inch. A salute. I lift mine back. Then I put my hand flat against my chest, where the watch sits warm under my jacket on a piece of paracord, still keeping time, still counting the minute. The war's over. I'm home. If this one hit you somewhere, friends, do me a favor, hit the like button and tell me down in the comments. And here's my real question for you tonight. Adrian came and said it out loud, and I still walked away. Would you have given him more than that? I want to hear it. I read every one.